In the primordial silence of eternity, when creation itself held its breath, something stirred in the depths of paradise. The morning light cascaded through leaves that had never known autumn, illuminating a world where death was still an unknown concept. Yet, in this perfection, shadows began to dance, shadows that would soon engulf everything in their darkness. Here stood Adam, the crown of divine creation, his eyes reflecting the infinite wisdom of his Creator. Beside him, Eve moved with the grace of untouched beauty, her laughter echoing through gardens where every flower bloomed in perpetual spring. They walked not just on earth, but in the very presence of the Almighty. This was Eden, not merely a place, but a state of being where heaven kissed earth. But perfection, as we would learn, was fragile. One whisper, one choice, one moment of doubt, and the axis of reality would shift forever. The serpent emerged from the shadows, its scales shimmering with deceptive beauty, carrying within its forked tongue the poison of rebellion. Has God truly said? Those words echoed through the garden like thunder through a crystal palace, shattering the harmony that had reigned since the dawn of time. When Eve's hand touched the forbidden fruit and Adam's teeth pierced its flesh, something fundamental broke in the fabric of creation. The earth itself shuddered. The animals lowered their heads, and for the first time in cosmic history, shame entered the human heart. If you enjoy this type of content, leave your like. It shows me I'm on the right track. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. And for those who want to deepen this journey, join as channel members. You'll not only have early access to all this knowledge, but you'll also help me dedicate more time to bringing these revelations to you. Let's continue. Paradise lost became exile gained. The flaming sword positioned at Eden's gates didn't just guard a garden, it severed the connection between two realms. Adam and Eve, now clothed in animal skins that spoke of the first death, walked toward an uncertain horizon. Behind them lay perfection, ahead, the unknown territory of a fallen world. When Eve gave birth to Cain, her cries of labor were humanity's first encounter with suffering, life entering the world through pain, a paradox that would define the human condition. Cain emerged strong and willful, his eyes already burning with an ambition that would prove dangerous. Abel followed, gentler in spirit, his heart naturally inclined toward the divine. Two brothers, two paths, two destinies that would forever illustrate the choice every human soul must make. As the years passed, these brothers grew not closer, but apart. Abel tended his flocks with devotion, understanding that everything he possessed was a gift from above. When he offered his sacrifice, he chose the finest of his lambs, presenting them with reverence and gratitude. The smoke of his offering rose straight toward heaven, accepted with divine pleasure. Cain, however, worked his fields with growing resentment. The earth, now cursed, yielded its fruit only through sweat and struggle. When harvest time came, he gathered his produce, not the best but merely adequate, and offered it with a heart already hardened by bitterness. The smoke of his sacrifice scattered in the wind, rejected not for its substance, but for the spirit in which it was given. "Why has my offering been rejected?" Cain demanded, his face darkening with the first shadows of murderous intent. The voice of God, still merciful, still calling, "Sin crouches at your door, Cain. Its desire is for you, but you must master it." But Cain had already made his choice. In a field where grain should have grown, the first human blood was shed. Abel's voice, crying out in surprise and pain, was silenced forever. The earth, already cursed, now drank the blood of the innocent. "Where is your brother?" came the divine question, not seeking information, but offering one last chance for repentance. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The words that would echo through millennia, spoken by the first murderer, establishing the terrible precedent of human indifference to human suffering. Cain became a wanderer, marked by God for protection, yet cursed to never find rest. But life continued. Seth was born to Adam and Eve, a replacement for the murdered Abel, and through his lineage, hope would persist through the darkening ages ahead. Generations multiplied across the earth. Men began to live for centuries, accumulating knowledge and power in ways we can barely comprehend today. Enoch walked with God and was taken up, becoming a witness to divine mysteries. Methuselah lived longer than any human before or since, a living reminder of the world's ancient glory. But with longevity came corruption, knowledge twisted toward evil purposes. The descendants of Cain built cities and forged weapons. Lamech declared his violent creed: if Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77-fold. Violence begat violence in an ever-escalating spiral, yet the greatest corruption was still to come. In the heavenly realms, beings of pure light watched over humanity. They were called the Watchers, angels assigned to observe and report on human affairs. But observation turned to fascination, and fascination to forbidden desire. "Look how beautiful the daughters of men are," they whispered among themselves, their holy purposes forgotten in the face of earthly attraction. 200 of these celestial beings gathered on Mount Hermon and swore a sacred oath, not of obedience to God, but of rebellion. They would descend to earth and take human wives, consequences be damned. Their descent was catastrophic. These beings of immense power and knowledge took human form, but retained their supernatural abilities. They appeared as gods to the awestruck humans, radiant and terrible in their beauty. Women desired them, men feared them, and the children born from these unions were unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Nephilim, giants in stature and appetite, emerged from these unholy relationships. These were not merely tall humans, but creatures of such size and strength that they could crush a man's skull with their bare hands. They grew rapidly, consumed voraciously, and ruled tyrannically. But their physical dominance was only part of the horror they brought. The Watchers began teaching forbidden knowledge to humanity. Azazel instructed men in the forging of weapons, swords that could cleave stone, armor that turned aside spears. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cutting. Armaros revealed how to counter spells. Barakel taught astrology. Kokabel disclosed the secrets of the constellations. Women learned the arts of seduction and glamour, how to paint their eyelids, how to use precious stones, how to dye their hair, how to enchant with perfumes and potions. What had been innocent beauty became calculated allure, designed to manipulate and control. The world transformed rapidly. Cities grew into megalopolises ruled by giant kings. Art and architecture reached incredible heights, but so did depravity and violence. The Nephilim, growing ever larger and more demanding, consumed first the harvests, then the livestock, and finally began devouring humans themselves. Humanity found itself enslaved to its own offspring. The giants demanded tribute: gold, silver, food, and eventually human sacrifice. Altars ran red with innocent blood. Children were cast into fires to appease the appetites of these monstrous rulers. But the worst was yet to come. The Watchers, having broken every boundary of the natural order, began experimenting with creation itself. They manipulated the forms of animals and humans, creating chimeric abominations, creatures with human torsos and animal heads, women whose voices could drive men insane, serpents with wings and human intelligence. The very fabric of creation was being torn apart. Species that God had separated were forcibly merged. The genetic integrity of every living thing was under assault. The earth itself groaned under the weight of these abominations. In the midst of this cosmic horror, one man stood apart. His name was Enoch, and he walked with God in the ancient way. While others pursued power and pleasure, Enoch pursued righteousness. His eyes saw beyond the material world into the spiritual realms where the true battle was being fought. In visions of terrible clarity, Enoch saw the throne of the Almighty surrounded by countless angels. He heard the divine decree, "Go and proclaim the judgment that is coming. The watchers shall be bound, the giants shall perish, the earth shall be cleansed by waters such as have never been seen. Enoch became a prophet of doom to a world determined to ignore divine warning. He stood in the great cities and proclaimed the coming judgment. The giants laughed, the humans mocked, the watchers dismissed his words as the ravings of a madman. But Enoch persisted. He wrote down everything he had seen, the structure of the heavens, the names of the rebellious angels, the details of the coming flood, the ultimate fate of the righteous and the wicked. His books became a testament to divine justice and mercy. Then, one day, Enoch simply vanished. He walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. His translation to heaven was both a sign of God's favor and a warning of what was to come. Without Enoch's prophetic voice, corruption accelerated. The Watchers taught humans to wage war with supernatural weapons. Cities fought cities with armies of giants, leading formations of enhanced human soldiers. The sky burned with unnatural fires. The ground shook with the footsteps of creatures that should never have existed. Magic and sorcery became commonplace. Humans learned to manipulate weather, to speak with demons, to animate the dead. What had once been the exclusive domain of angels was now trafficked in the marketplaces of corrupted cities. The earth itself began to rebel. Earthquakes split the ground. Mountains spewed forth lava and ash. The seas turned colors never seen before. Animals fled their natural habitats, driven mad by the presence of the abominations. Plants withered. Rivers ran backwards. But still, humanity refused to repent. In heaven, the archangels presented themselves before the throne of the Most High. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel witnessed to the corruption below. The cry of innocent blood reached the divine ears. The groaning of creation itself pleaded for relief. The decree came swift and final. Bind the Watchers in the depths of the earth until the day of judgment. Destroy the giants, cleanse the earth with flood, but preserve a remnant through Noah, the righteous man. The execution of judgment began immediately. Michael descended with his heavenly army, wielding swords of pure light. The battle between the forces of heaven and the Nephilim shook the foundations of the world. Giants who had thought themselves invincible fell before the power of the archangels. Their death cries echoed across continents. The Watchers were seized and bound with chains that burned like stars, then cast into the deepest caverns of the earth, there to await their final punishment. But on earth, in the midst of this cosmic war, a simple man continued his simple work. Noah was a farmer, a man of calloused hands and weathered face. While others built towers to assault heaven, he built nothing more ambitious than barns and sheepfolds. While others sought power over men and demons, he sought only to please his God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and he raised them in the fear of the Lord. In the world gone mad with power and pleasure, this family held fast to the ancient ways. They observed the Sabbath, they honored their elders, they told stories of the time when God walked with men in gardens of innocence. People mocked them as backward, old-fashioned, naive. What place did such simplicity have in an age of wonders? What purpose could such humility serve when giants ruled the earth? But Noah had something his contemporaries lacked. He had the ear of God. One night, as Noah walked through his fields under stars that seemed dimmer than they once had been, the voice of the Eternal broke through the silence. Noah. The farmer fell to his knees, recognizing the voice that had spoken worlds into existence. The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. I will establish my covenant with you. What followed was the most detailed architectural instruction ever given by divine lips. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, 3 decks, rooms throughout, a window, a door in the side, pitch within and without to make it waterproof. For I am bringing the flood of water upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life from under heaven. Everything on the earth shall perish. Noah's sons might have questioned. They might have argued. They might have demanded proof. Instead, they simply said, "If the Lord has spoken, we will obey." The construction began the next morning. Noah and his sons felled trees, shaped beams, fitted joints. The sound of their axes and hammers echoed across valleys that had never known rain in any serious quantity. Neighbors gathered to watch and laugh. Look at the madman building a ship where there's no sea. Noah's finally lost his mind. A flood? The ground barely gets damp. 300 cubits long, that's impossible to build with just 4 men. But the work continued. Day by day, the ark took shape. Day by day, the signs in heaven grew more ominous. Day by day, the violence on earth escalated. The giants, realizing their fellow Nephilim were being destroyed by angelic forces, became increasingly desperate and vicious. They enslaved entire populations to build monuments to their own glory. They demanded worship as gods, executing any who refused. They practiced ritual cannibalism, consuming humans in religious ceremonies designed to increase their power. Women were forced to bear hybrid offspring. Children were trained as warriors from birth. Art became propaganda. Music became incantation. Poetry became curse. Every aspect of human culture was corrupted and weaponized. Yet Noah kept building. Animals began arriving. Not just pairs, but whole herds and flocks, guided by divine instinct toward the massive vessel. Lions walked peacefully beside lambs. Eagles perched next to doves. Predators showed no interest in prey. It was as if Eden's peace had returned in miniature around the ark. People gathered to witness this impossible sight. Some began to wonder if perhaps Noah wasn't mad after all. But wonder didn't lead to repentance. Curiosity didn't produce change of heart. They treated it as entertainment, a temporary diversion from their usual pursuits of pleasure and power. The final week arrived. God spoke to Noah one last time. "Enter the ark, you and all your household. In 7 days I will send rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out every living thing that I have made from the face of the ground." Noah gathered his family, his wife of many decades, whose faith had never wavered. Shem and his wife, Ham and his wife, Japheth and his wife. 8 people, 8 souls who would carry the future of humanity in their genes and their testimonies. As they entered the ark, the crowds outside continued their revelries. Music and laughter filled the air. The smell of roasted meat and fermented wine created an atmosphere of celebration. If this was their last week on earth, they would make it memorable. But something supernatural occurred as the last of Noah's family crossed the threshold. The massive door, too heavy for human hands to move, swung shut by itself. The sound echoed like thunder across the plains. Invisible hands sealed the entrance with divine authority. Silence fell over the crowd. The party atmosphere evaporated. People approached the ark uncertainly, running their hands along its sealed sides. "Noah, open up! We want to see inside!" No answer from within. "Noah, this isn't funny anymore." Still no response. The sky darkened, though it was midday. Clouds gathered with unnatural speed, swirling into patterns that resembled vast, watching eyes. The wind picked up, carrying scents that no one could identify. Ozone and sulfur, salt water and something else. Something that made hearts race with inexplicable dread. The first drops fell like warnings. Heavy, warm, each one striking the earth with audible impact. Children pointed and laughed. Few of them had ever seen rain before. But their parents were beginning to remember ancient stories, tales dismissed as myths, warnings preserved in half-forgotten songs. Then the heavens opened. This was not rain as we know it. This was water with purpose, with weight, with wrath. It fell not in drops, but in sheets, in walls, in cascades that seemed to pour from the very throne room of God. Lightning split the sky in continuous displays of power that made the greatest of the giants seem like insects. But the terror from above was matched by horror from below. The fountains of the great deep burst forth. Water erupted from the earth in geyser columns hundreds of feet high. The ground cracked and split, releasing torrents from subterranean oceans that few had imagined existed. Within hours, streams became rivers, rivers became torrents, valleys became lakes. Cities found themselves islands, then watched their highest buildings disappear beneath the rising waters. The crowds that had mocked Noah now pressed against the ark's sealed sides, pounding with their fists, pleading for entry. "We believe now. We're sorry. Let us in." But the door that God had sealed could not be opened by human hands. Divine justice, long delayed, would not be denied. Inside the ark, Noah's family huddled together, listening to the sounds of destruction outside. The animals, agitated by the sounds of terror and death, filled the vessel with their cries. The wooden hull groaned under the stress of the rising flood, but held firm, constructed according to divine specifications by divine wisdom. "Father," whispered Shem, "I can hear them screaming." Noah's face was wet with tears that mixed rain and sorrow. "So can I, my son. So can I." The giants, those terrible offspring of the Watchers, fought against the flood with their supernatural strength. They seized boulders and hurled them at the sky as if they could break the clouds. They gathered their human slaves and forced them to build dams and levees. They retreated to the highest mountains, establishing fortresses where they thought they could ride out the deluge. But this was no ordinary flood. This was the judgment of the Creator himself. The waters rose 50 feet above the highest peaks. Mountain ranges that had stood since the foundation of the world disappeared beneath the waves. The giants, for all their power, could not hold their breath indefinitely. One by one, their arrogant voices were silenced forever. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain continued without pause. Thunder provided a constant soundtrack of divine wrath. Lightning revealed glimpses of a world being completely transformed. What had been dry land became ocean. What had been civilization became wasteland. The ark rode the waves like a massive coffin floating on the grave of the ancient world. Inside, time seemed suspended. Days blended into nights. The family ate in silence, prayed in whispers, and wondered if they would ever again see dry ground. Outside, the last remnants of the corrupted world were being erased. Temples to false gods crumbled and sank. Libraries filled with forbidden knowledge dissolved into illegible pulp. Artworks created to glorify the giants became food for fish. The entire infrastructure of rebellion against God was being systematically destroyed. But God remembered Noah. After 150 days, the rain stopped. The fountains of the deep were sealed. A wind began to blow across the endless expanse of water, and slowly, very slowly, the flood began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. For the first time in months, the vessel stopped rocking. The family felt solid ground beneath their feet, even though they couldn't yet see it. Noah sent out a raven, which flew back and forth until the waters dried up. Then he sent out a dove, which returned because it found no place to rest. 7 days later, he sent the dove again. This time it returned with a fresh olive leaf in its beak, the first sign of renewed life on the cleansed earth. When Noah finally opened the ark, the sight that greeted him was both tragic and beautiful. The world had been washed clean. The mountains stood stark and bare. The valleys lay empty of all they had once contained. But the sky was clear, the air was pure, and the earth was ready for a new beginning. The animals emerged first, joyfully returning to their natural habitats. Then came Noah's family, blinking in the brilliant sunlight of a world reborn. Noah's first act on dry ground was to build an altar and offer sacrifices to the God who had saved them. The smoke of the offerings rose straight up into the clear sky, accepted with divine pleasure. And God made a promise that would echo through all the ages to follow. Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. And as a sign of this covenant, God set a rainbow in the clouds. The first rainbow, a bridge of color spanning between heaven and earth, a reminder that judgment had its limits, that mercy would ultimately triumph, that hope could survive even the darkest floods. Shem asked his father, "Is this truly a new beginning?" Noah nodded, his weathered face reflecting both sorrow for what was lost and hope for what could be. "Yes, my son. But remember, the same hearts that corrupted the old world beat in our chests. The flood cleansed the earth, but only God can cleanse the human heart. The world before the flood was gone forever. Its giants lay silent in watery graves. Its angels were bound in chains of darkness. Its technologies were lost beneath mountains of mud and sediment. Its cities existed now only in the memories of 8 survivors. But humanity survived. The image of God in man, though cracked and tarnished, had not been completely destroyed. In the genetic code of Noah's family lay the potential for both great good and great evil. The choice that Adam and Eve had made in Eden, the choice between obedience and rebellion, would have to be made again by every generation. As Noah's descendants scattered across the new earth, they carried with them stories of the ancient world. Tales of giants and fallen angels became legends. Memories of divine judgment became myths. But the truth remained, embedded in the collective memory of the human race. There had been a time of great wickedness, a great flood, and a great salvation. The world before the flood teaches us profound truths that echo through history to our own day. It reveals the terrible potential for evil that lies within the human heart when God is forgotten. It demonstrates the patience of divine justice, but also its certainty when that patience is exhausted. Most importantly, it shows us that no matter how dark the world becomes, God preserves a remnant. No matter how corrupt civilization grows, there will always be a Noah, someone who walks with God in the midst of a crooked generation. The antediluvian world was not destroyed because God was cruel, but because He is holy. The flood was not an act of divine rage, but of divine love. Love for righteousness, love for creation itself, love for the future generations who would inherit a cleansed earth. Today, as we look around our modern world, we might see echoes of that ancient corruption. Technology used for evil purposes, power concentrated in the hands of the ruthless, violence and immorality celebrated as virtues, the boundaries between right and wrong deliberately blurred. But we also see the same hope that sustained Noah. The same God who called one family into an ark still calls individuals to salvation. The same divine patience that waited for repentance in the ancient world still waits today. The same covenant faithfulness that preserved humanity through the flood still operates in our time. The rainbow still appears after storms, a reminder that judgment has its seasons, but mercy endures forever. The story of the world before the flood is not just ancient history, it's a preview of divine justice and divine grace that operates in every age. Manisinita and you, what do you think about this ancient world that was completely destroyed but whose lessons echo to our days? Leave your comment sharing your opinion, and don't forget to like if the content brought value. To not miss the next videos from the channel, activate the notification bell. And remember, by becoming a member, you not only directly support this work, but also have early access to all this knowledge. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching, and may God be with you all.